Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Pastor and Wife podcast.
We welcome you to hang out with us today.
I'm Hansel.
I'm Natalie.
Okay, we got our special guest here with us from Alaska. His name is Michael T. Sloan.
I've
So
never heard his. I don't think I've ever heard his full name like that before.
well, we just call him Mike. Mountain
He's
Mike
Mike.
Sloan.
Yep.
So for me, I really respect this man. He took me on a hike before we were married, and I think he was testing me, and it was the
He
coldest
was.
thing. It was the coldest thing I've ever done. Snowshoeing through the backcountry in Alaska to his cabin, and man, I felt like quitting, but I was just like so mad that he told me that people in LA walk slow, and so I just kept going, and that helped me a lot. You know what I mean? It helped me get a love for the outdoors, and now I'm teaching our kids how to conquer adversity through the outdoors, and that's what we want to talk about.
Mhm.
But before we get him on, you have any memories with Mike? Because I know you've known him
I
for a
have
long time.
I have a lot of years knowing Mike and his wife Molly, and I've probably known them for a good 25 years at least. And so, when I was like in high school, Mike and Molly were kind of like an aunt and uncle to me. And
Yeah.
so he was testing you. And he's so good at that. And that's just what he's called to do. I love them and what Mike does. And I'm uh, just really looking forward to talking with him and sharing him with our people. So.
All right. Without further ado, let's get Mike Sloan into the podcast.
All right.
All right, Mike, what's up?
Must be there. Nothing. Just sitting up here in Alaska in a nice clear day. So looking out at Denali and kind of.
Oh man, that's a scary mountain, man. I have to tell you, Mike, I finally got a permit to summit Mount Whitney in October.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, at first they denied me and my group, but then we just kept bugging them, and we got it. So
I can I ask a question? Like, would you really have pursued like mountain climbing and hiking as much if Mike hadn't really taken you out and challenged you? And how much of it?
no, I just hated it, just because it was long and hard, and you know what, Mike? Like when you gave me that compass, I was like, "Hey, I achieved something," and that's something I shouldn't be ashamed of. And so I just started, exploring the mountains around my house and seeing if I could push myself to summit. And it just became a thing to where, wow, Mike was right. We can teach kids how, how to really build character, and as Christians, that's what we should do. So I think, Mike, you bringing me out to the backcountry in the bush in Alaska was God's providence.
Yeah, and God's testing for you to. If you died, well, it's just the way it is. You live, so great.
You weren't
Like
strong
we used
enough,
to.
too bad.
We used to say, Logan, if you die, there's other men to take your place. So
Yeah, and I really wanted to marry Natalie, so I was
yeah,
like, I can't die here.
yeah, right. Being back, passed the test. So
Nice.
so you got a thing for Whitney. That's awesome. Daniel and I, as you know, we climbed all the high points, all 50 states, and then Whitney was one of the ones we did, which was a pain. We couldn't get a lottery, so we had to climb it one deal. So we left like at 11 at night, climbed all
Hmm.
night, came back down the next day. I
Wow.
think there's a
Wow.
story in that book about that, and
Yeah.
ending up down Death Valley from that time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
that's the highest mountain in the lower 48. So
Yeah, yeah. We were fortunate to not, we were gonna backpack it. One day for me, man, I have to train really hard, because it's not easy, but I look forward to it, But
yeah,
I'm telling the three other guys in my group, like, you better train, man, because everyone's from LA.
yeah. It's definitely up
So,
there. It's almost 15.
Yeah.
just for context, Daniel's one of your sons, and you and
Mhm.
Daniel did all 50 high points, right?
Yeah,
Together?
you know what? Started when he was 12,
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
we lived in Missouri, actually. And it took about a 12-year project to do all 50 high points.
Wow.
And some of them are easy, obviously, and some of them are hard. But I always combine that, you know, when we were in Missouri with youth group stuff. And
Mhm.
in fact, Natalie's sister, got to the top of Katahdin in Maine. And
I
Nice.
didn't even know
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
yeah, she did. And of course, a lot of them you couldn't do that. You know, a lot of them are pretty good climbs, you know, like Rainier and Hood and all those kind
Mhm.
of things. Denali, of
Mhm.
course, stops everybody unless you're really committed. And
Yeah.
I did Denali in 71 because I was a climber.
Wow.
And 71, we did a first ascent from the north side, and it took us 32 days on Denali.
Oh my gosh.
And but
Whoa.
that was back when I was 18, and it totally. What do you know at 18? You know, it's like sounds fun, you know.
Yeah.
But
It in fact, that's the story that, man, impacted me from your book. So you guys, Mike has a book, Bear Attacks, Dog Teams, and a Sinking Boat. There's a chapter in here where he talks about his 32-day trip to the top of Mount Denali, which is now Mount McKinley again,
yeah, whatever,
which is cool.
whichever.
Yeah.
Whichever.
And I'm gonna just paraphrase here, but I think for all the Christian men, this is a very, very important story about the dangerous middle where the success for the climb or the trek doesn't start at the beginning. It's decided in the middle where you're tired, you're thinking about all the circumstances that are going on. You got blisters, you got terrible food, there's bears and other stuff. Whether or not you keep going or not is the decision to be made. And man, that rings so true to me because every climb that I do here in Southern California that's hard, like, I'm taking the boys next week to their first 10,000-foot peak here in Southern California, and I haven't done one since last summer, and I'm like, "Oh, am I even in shape to do it? I'm just gonna do it."
Yeah,
But it is in the middle of that, in the rough parts where your mind tries to, tell you to go back, it's not worth it, it's better at home, to get a hot meal, like that you said in the book, the Israelites were like, back in Egypt, we had leeks and onions," you know?
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, Mike, if you can, maybe expand on that and how that helps young children.
Well, you know, the thing is, yeah, you are tested in the middle of usually of anything because you had the initial emotional highs of the beginning of something, and then that
Mhm,
kind of has so much energy to take you so far, and then you run out of that. And
mhm.
what's going to keep you going to the end through all the rest of the trip is going to be your ability to be motivated and to accept, you know, the trials really, and it boils down to character
Ah,
of perseverance and you know, wanting to finish the goal. And so the goal has to be worth the trials you go through, you know. And of course when you're summiting a mountain like Denali, for me the goal was to get to the top and then get back down, you know. And what in most, because we live in Talkeetna where most climbers, well, all climbers leave really from here to go climb Denali.
yeah.
And usually every time when they come down unsuccessfully, it's usually because of group dynamics or people just giving up for whatever reason.
Oh, really?
It could be valid reasons, it could be whatever, but you know, it's
Yeah.
that middle. It's that, oh, the weather's too cold, there's storms coming or whatever, and those things get kind of escalated to become escape to get out. And I
Oh,
can't fault people for that because it's pretty tough, but it can be that way in life, you know, in a lot of things. And you know,
mm,
the thing is, what we want to be doing, and what you know, really is developing character in young people, especially in kids, and of course, I do that now with my grandkids. You know, with taking them out hiking now. Or, you know, next week going on a Seward Beach hike,
yeah.
5 miles out, and I'll take the kids, and they're, you know, 5 years old and whatever. We'll make it. like you do with your kids, but you want to start early on that because the ability to handle those kind of things, you have to build into somebody. It just doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And let me, what, because really what we want to do and what I've always wanted to do over 40 years of using the outdoors is to develop in people the ability to take risks or assume risk. And
Mm-hmm.
let me show it to you this way. Okay, see if you can see this chart.
Okay.
Can you see that?
I can. It's
Oh, is it the mirror
it's
view?
mirrored. Yeah.
Huh?
It's mirrored, so it's the words are backwards.
Just read the
Oh, they are.
words.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I can explain it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This small circle,
Yes.
that's where people live. That's called the area you can control.
Okay.
That's what you live in every day.
Mm-hmm.
And this big area over here, we're going to call that chaos.
Okay.
And that's where you're unfamiliar, uncertain, never been there, don't know what it is, but it's chaos. It's like you have no control over it. You've never been that way before. And how do you get people to move into assuming risk? Because risk is kind of funny. Some people can approach a ski slope and they look down the hill and they assume, yeah, I can do that. Let's do it. And
Yeah.
then another person right behind him will ski up there and say, no, I don't want to do that, and flee or
Uh-huh.
back off from that, withdraw from that risk. Well, what you learn is that risk is something that you develop in people and the ability to take risk. And so when you look at this diagram again,
Mm-hmm.
this big area will be chaos. Now, the way you move people into ability to handle more risk, and your examples, what you said in your life is a good example of this, is you move them into chaos a little
Mm.
bit. See, it's not a full immersion. It's like you do a little bit at a time. Small steps into learning to handle risk into a chaos is how you develop people. Now, it's more than just developing people. It's a neuroscience. If you look at this, is you're doing more than just moving people into risk. What you do is your brain has billions of neurons.
Mm-hmm.
When you move people into risk, you're stretching them into a new area and you're actually developing their brain to develop channels into these new neurons. Now, it's what you call neuroplasticity. It's a
Okay.
true thing. This is how your brain works. This isn't make believe. This is how it works.
Mhm.
Right.
And what you're doing is you're actually increasing their ability in their brain to handle things that they didn't before because they have built the neurons or the neuroplasticity to handle it. So instead of saying, "Oh, I can't do that," they said, "Yeah, I can do that."
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good example of that is when Daniel, my son, went in the Marines. He was 3 tours in Iraq. Well, his first tour, he's under combat and freaked out, of course,
Mm.
scared because of the danger. By his third term, he wasn't freaked out at all. Well, he'd be
Yeah.
scared, but he wasn't as freaked out as before. It wasn't that the danger was less. It's just that he learned in his mind how to interpret things and how to develop the ability to handle that risk.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
your brain works that way. It's called neuroplasticity. And it's an amazing thing that people don't think about. But this is what you're doing. When you take your kids out
Mm-hmm.
and you take them on these hikes, what you're doing is developing their brains and waves, neurons and channels to be able to cope with more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And so when you do that a little bit at a time, you're building in them the ability in their cognitive brain to be able to interpret things not as fear but as risk, and that they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a good example of that is when I just took Ian, Ian.
Yeah.
He's 18. I took him to Nepal.
Yeah.
Now he's leaving this area here, total security, sitting in Anchorage, going to McDonald's 3 times a day, life secure. What do you got to worry about, right?
Right.
Perfect controlled life. Well, I'm taken to a new area over in Nepal, which is totally chaos. It's absolute chaos to him. I mean, it's Hindu. It's just totally. There's nothing more different than Nepal or India than the West.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So he's going over there. Now he would never do that on his own. But what I do is I take them into that a little bit and into that chaos, and I take him with me, and then he goes into that, and all of a sudden he sees this stuff, and he starts to build the ability in his brain to handle these things by his neurons. It's much, it's like you're building muscles. The more strain you put on your muscles,
Mm.
which you could do, the bigger your muscles get.
Right.
So as you're sitting on that California beach and everybody laughing at you, if you did a little muscle building, you might look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
People would think you're something.
Right.
Mike,
But
like you're so good at this, and that explains everything, about your I mean, it's one thing to know this, but I just think you just so brilliantly like put this into practice with kids. You've
oh
done it
yeah,
for so many years. Like I went to you took me and some other kids to India
oh
and Thailand.
yeah,
It was right after that earthquake that caused a tsunami in like 2004 or something, and we went all over there.
yeah,
And I remember there's one kid who really was stretched a lot because I can be flexible. I can go
Mhm.
with the flow, but each trip will kind of stretch different people in different ways. And this one friend of ours, this one kid was just like, so what's the plan? Like, so what time are we going to do this? And what, he's like,
yeah, yeah,
oh, so he's just like really struggling with not having a plan. And for me that
yeah.
wasn't a big deal, but
Well,
for each person,
that's
it's different.
exactly, and it stretches everybody, even me.
Mhm,
But let me
mhm,
just say that we as Christian leaders want to develop people,
Mhm.
and
mhm,
so we want to increase their ability to handle chaos, because
mhm,
this is where somebody's future lies right here. The future
mhm.
potential is unlocked in this area, not going to McDonald's 3 times a day and cruising down the San Diego freeway or something like that. It is, this is their potential development and right out in here. And so we want to be able to get people out to reach that more and more. Now, our part might be a little part like this, but the more we take them into that thing, the more we teach them the ability to handle risk and enter into that zone of chaos and not feel uncomfortable, but to assume the risk and step out, the better it is for them. And so, like Ian, so I took him to Nepal, and now
Mhm.
what? He wants to go back every year.
Mhm.
Now,
Wow,
he
that's
would never
awesome.
have done that by himself. I took him out to the village where his dad lived because we lived in Nepal for 4 years in a village when we were 30 years ago when Jake was 8. I
Mhm.
took Ian out to the village where his dad lived for 4 years when he was 8. And this is where your dad grew up. That's why he's so weird, and all that. But that he would never do that on his own. So our role as adults is to be take people into that zone. Now, there's a technical term for that because when we got back from Nepal 25 years ago, whatever it was, I went to Wheaton and got my master's in education, and this has
Mhm.
changed everything for me. Was that there's a term for this in the educational thing called zone of proximal development, and that is where it takes somebody to take somebody into a new area. In other words, they don't know it, they don't know what it's like, but if you can take somebody in a little bit at a time, well, you can develop them, or they will develop the ability to handle more and more chaos. Instead of freaking out, they'll say, "Yeah, I can handle that." So Ian now, instead of saying, "Hey, I can't go back there," he's saying, "Yeah, let's go back." Why? Because he's developed a lot of root things, but one of the things is his brain has developed the neurons to say, yeah, that's no problem. And it's not flashing retreat, withdrawal. It's flashing, yeah, I can do that. And that's what you call neuroplasticity. Very important to know what you're doing with
Mhm.
your kids right now is this. You can build
Mhm,
muscles with weights, but you can build their brain to handle risk by putting them into risk. And,
Mhm.
it's not that they go overboard when they can't handle it because you're with them in that zone of proximal development. So
mhm,
you're taking them into that so they don't get overboard and have
Yeah.
a catastrophe, but you're taking them in so that they can handle it a little bit at a time. Because I'm telling you, where your kids' future is unlocked is in here, this zone, not this one but this one. And so we as Christian leaders want to build in people, our kids or whatever, the ability to take risk or assume risk, not to where to avoid it, but to assume because they can do it, they've done a little bit at a time. And who knows, maybe next time, you know, he can go to India or something like that, or something different. And this time we spend a little more time in Thailand so he can get familiar with Thailand and stuff. So that's our
Mm.
thing. And that zone of proximal development is where we come in as adults in the church, as fathers or mothers or whatever. We can actually take people into these areas that they couldn't do on their own. Now you could say, let's take a biblical term for that called discipleship,
Yeah.
but it's more than that. Is discipleship's people don't understand that what that means, you know, in a lot of ways. But what it simply means is you are taking people into a zone they would never have been before, and you can show them how to do it and what to do by your life and by taking them with you,
Mhm.
and or taking them on hikes and climbs and seeing it through to the end. And when I got back from Nepal, you know, we started my whole outdoor ministry really with youth in the church, and
Yeah.
started when Jake was 12. You know, we do 50-mile hikes and father, son, daughter canoe trips for 8 days. And I'll tell you why that started, because when I was at Wheaton, getting my degree there, Wheaton's south of Chicago, so it's suburbs of Chicago. It's super rich suburbs.
Mm.
And through Wheaton is what they call the Prairie Pass, and it's about a 58-mile, whatever, restored path through the suburbs that has, you know, 5-foot trail, gravel, and then on each side's 5 feet of restored vegetation. You know, so you could walk through that and feel like you're kind of out in a park, you know, basically, but for a
Yeah.
long ways. And this became a revelatory moment to me, changed everything for me. This incident. And I noticed that when I met somebody on that prairie path, they'd always say hi to you, or you say hi.
Uh-huh.
But I realized that if I was 5 feet over, 10 feet over in that cul-de-sac, they wouldn't even look at me.
Oh,
Now, what's the difference? That became a ministry change for me.
okay.
What's the difference? Why do
I
you
don't know.
think that is? Why would they say hi on that prairie path? But I know dang well over in the cul-de-sac, they wouldn't even look at me.
Is it some sort of affinity because you're both on the same path?
Well, kind of, but it's
Mm.
more than you are sharing. Now, this is crucial.
Okay.
You're sharing the identity of a unique experience.
Okay.
That's why motorcycle clubs go, you know, have
Mhm.
that affinity. That's or RV clubs, or that's why you're always seeing people go overseas and put
Mhm.
their arms around the orphan for a picture. They're trying to share that identity. Or
Yeah.
crime does this, you know. I mean, if you share an identity of unique experience through crime, that makes you tighter as a group. It's an
Mhm.
identity thing. And so this thing really works. And of course, you know, marriage works, family works this way too. But anything, army, military, that's why you can have a German soldier from World War II sit there and have fellowship with a British soldier from World War II on D-Day, even
Mhm.
though 180 years ago they were trying to kill each other. And
Right.
now they can sit and have a fellowship over that experience. And so now that became a change for me, because I thought, well, if that's true, why can't I create that in ministry? You know,
Yes.
instead of just coming together on Sunday and leaving, I got to do something different. And so I started the father, son, daughter outdoor canoe trips, which 8-day canoe trips in Canada. I do it up on the Bower Lakes, which is awesome. And it takes us 8 days, and you had father, son together in a canoe. And or the 50-mile hikes. I tried to create this unique experience, and it really works. And the mission trips or whatever. And because I just didn't want, I'm just not into head knowledge. I'm not into
Mhm.
preaching. I'm not into pulpit ministry, so to speak. I'm kind of an action guy. So what I would do is use experiential kind of teaching to create these experiences and the teaching times, you know. And so, and I'm still connected with about everybody I ever did those trips with in one form or another. And now people are getting in
Wow.
their 30s and 40s, and they're starting to reflect back on their lives and how miserable I made them. And now they're starting to actually write emails acknowledging what difference those trips made, basically.
Yeah.
And
I wanna touch on the misery part. I
yeah,
think it's so important because, uh, I see a lot of young men not go through any type of adversity. In metropolitan LA, some kids they've never seen the water, or they've never been in the mountains.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it kind of creates this weak sense of security, especially in boys when they become men. They end up being like perpetually like boys instead of men, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. How
Yeah.
why is this happening?
Well, it's because they're really stunting themselves emotionally and mentally
Mm,
into the ability to assume adventure and risk. And you know, comfort and fear are the biggest robbers of faith that I know of. The
mm,
Mm,
seeking of comfort and the the dwelling in fear. And so
mm.
I've seen it. I mean, Natalie knows these people. Back in Missouri, I won't mention any names, but it was in Missouri. I took this guy. He was probably 30 years old at the time, to Nepal,
uh-huh.
and he was married, or sorry, India, and I'll never forget it because his mom and dad, who are Christians forever, sobbing at the doorway, thinking their
Yeah.
son was going to
Mm,
go die,
He
and
was
just,
30 and they
well,
were
mm,
at least,
sobbing?
yeah, married
Okay.
and took him and his wife. And so the parents were just sobbing that, don't
Mm.
go, whatever, you're going to die, and whatever. And these are Christians. I'm
mm,
thinking they need to develop their faith,
mhm,
and, and no, the thing is, what produces faith is going to be getting into that chaos
Mhm.
and conquering that fear that we have to enter that chaos, or the willingness to leave the comfort and go out and spend 8 days on a canoe trip or hike or whatever, or something like that, or a snowshoe trip or something like that,
Yeah.
and that
Well,
develops.
I heard somewhere that faith is spelled RISK. I
Yeah, yeah.
don't know
Well,
who coined that phrase.
That was, Pastor Dave Crone.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, I tell you what I tell the kids is, how do you spell fun?
Okay.
PAIN. And they all know that. I
Oh
got
my
a
gosh.
I got a toenail necklace in my van that's
I was gonna ask you about that.
yeah. So this toenail necklace represents all the pain I've caused people. I mean, Cindy Halverson, she lost about 5 toenails, 150-mile hike, and all these people, and it's actually not a real toenail necklace. Connie Glore made it for me, fake ones, because she went on that 50-mile hike in Montana, and I always joked about it. And she made that for me, but I
That's
have
so
it hanging
funny.
in my van rearview mirror.
That's so funny.
That's
Well,
so
But
good.
as parents and as like m- m- ministers or whatever you call us, ministry leaders, we are training our kids and we're training people no matter what we do. And no matter if we're like letting people be comfortable or encouraging them just to stay safe, or whatever we're giving off is how we're training them.
Yeah.
And unless we're really intentional about, like you were saying, guiding them into these little, like, sticking their foot into some uncomfortable situations, we have to be intentional about that, like you were saying.
yeah,
And I
Yeah.
think, to me, part of that experience is, you could also say, it's giving them a victory, giving them a win.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, you did something hard and you did it. You got that accomplishment, you got a win, and it really builds a lot of strength and confidence. It's
Oh, exactly. I mean, when you look at human development, which I really changed my view of everything, the different stages people go through, and because at my age, 73, I'm in a different stage than your kids are, or my
Mhm.
grandkids are, or whatever. It's just the way it is. Teenagers are in a different stage than you are, and not to recognize that, you do at your own fault, or
Mm.
peril, let's put it that way, in ministry, because you can really zero in on different stages and help them develop as a human, and so at that age, junior high and things like that, you're really trying to build in them the ability to assume risk and build confidence,
Yeah.
because they're looking at this big world out there and they don't know what it is, and they're starting to leave the mom and dad stuff, and they're looking at a sphere of influence that's their friends, and you know, they see this world out there where people work, and what are they going to do? And that's why their heroes so much become, in that age, stupid basketball players or stupid football players, or whatever it is. Do you really want that becoming your kid's hero? And because they don't know, but that to them looks pretty cool, you know, and that's
Right.
what really attracts a lot of people and all that. Well, they're looking at that. So that's a perfect age or stage for people like us to come in and offer them something else through challenging things, not just sitting around talking about David and Goliath and the stinking things, but really challenging things, you know, getting out of the church and developing their character. Because you know, these stupid Six Flags or Seven Flags or whatever they are, you
Mhm.
know, those are worthless for doing that. You know, I understand the big oop-de-doo and whatever, you know, and all that. But they forget about that as soon as they're done.
Right.
The thing is that when you develop somebody's character, you develop their person, and the intrinsic value of that is so important that they'll never forget that. And so even if it's 20 years later, they're still remembering the trips that developed them internally that I did. And they, you know, had several emails about that, just recognizing that impact of those trips 20 years ago. And so, and it's not that I did anything special. I just was there, took them. You know, it's the trip that does it. It's the experiences, the uncontrolled chaos that develops them as a person and their ability in their mind to handle risk. And now you've got these kids that are just kind of glued to the social media stuff, and that's
Mm.
not good, because number one, they're rewiring their brain a different way.
Right.
And suicide, depression has gone up 145% in girls since 2015.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
And all this stuff is not good. Now, something ain't working there. And
Well,
so,
now, can I ask, like, I want to like continue on with that, and I want to know, like, do you notice a difference between, like, youth you would take out before and like young people now? Do you notice that in your
oh, yeah,
experience?
absolutely. I just took Ian to Nepal with a friend of his who was 16, and the
Mhm.
guy was constantly on his phone, you know, constantly. Now, what that does is, the problem is with the phone is it allows you to withdraw. Instead of
Mhm,
interacting with chaos or where you're at, it allows you
mhm,
to withdraw, and then you can just withdraw and be entertained, you know, and be satisfied. And so it really robs people of the ability. So I was constantly saying, I'm going to take those. Well, I won't say what I said. I'm going to take those phones from you guys, and I'm going to take them from 10 to 4.
Okay.
Oh my God, you're going to kill us. We'll die, you know,
We'll
whatever. I
die.
said, well, it's going to happen. I said, well, I'll say a good funeral for you back home. But it's anyway. So it's a constant thing. We never had that, you know, 20 years ago. You never had that
mhm,
thing. You might have had the iPod with the music thing, but that was about it, or whatever. But
mhm,
and so now, and now even in Nepal, you can get, you know, you can get online at most
mhm,
guest houses or hotels, whatever. You know, it's just there. But and so the tendency, because when you're under that chaos, because again, when you enter into this chaos, what's the tendency? It's going to be to shrink,
Mhm.
withdraw, because it's too challenging, or you don't know how to cope with it.
Yeah.
And so the tendency is to withdraw unless you get somebody to kind of push you into it. Well, now
Mhm.
cell phones and all that stuff allow somebody a very easy way to just withdraw from interacting with the chaos or the culture or people or whatever it is. And so it's a problem you got to kind of watch. I don't know. It's never saw it like this before. And it's not like
Yeah.
it's just American kids. Thailand, they're all on it too. And Nepal now, the girls are on it, you know, and the guys, they're all on their cell phones everywhere. And so
Wow.
mhm,
it's not just an American thing. It's everywhere, you know. And
mhm,
Yeah,
it's
that's a
just a
good
very
point.
addicting thing, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point because, well, if we didn't have such access to, so much information and entertainment in the palm of our hands before. When I was growing up, if I wanted to play video games with my friends or talk with my friends, they had to be in my house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there were still interactions. And I find that some of these guys that have become adults, they're now, in their 20s, they lack decision making capabilities, they lack drive, they lack, you know, follow through, and the resilience
purpose.
part,
Yeah.
purpose. The resilience part is what bothers me because any hint of opposition or any hint of risk, any hint of something that tests their physical ability or their mental capacity or emotional capacity, they withdraw.
Yeah.
They're used to
Well, it's
withdrawing.
exactly what we're talking about. What
Mm,
they've done is they've stunted their brain from developing neuroplasticity. Now, what's the point of raising a kid? You get a
mhm,
kid from a baby up to a toddler. What are you trying to do with that kid? You're trying to stimulate a brain so the kid can grow mentally to assume things, to put square pegs in square things. That's not
Mhm.
just a natural innate thing.
mhm.
What you're trying to do is build in them the neurons to handle the new things, and that's the idea of playing. That's the idea of puzzles. That's the idea of interacting with a kid. You just don't put a kid in the corner, put a basket over it, and then let them out at 18 and think they're going to be able to handle risk.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't happen. And so it's the same thing. When you have a 20-year-old or 22-year-old that has withdrawn from the ability to interact with risk or chaos, they've stunted themselves in the neurological sense to where they don't have the channels and neurons that trigger things that say, yeah, that's okay or that. And the only hope, the only thing you can do from that is to get them into those experiences, into that
Yeah.
chaos, and develop those things. You can always do that. That's why Natalie's dad, when he got in that accident, his brain was hurt. Well, what happened was
Mm,
the plasticity started taking over and healing the brain, and other
Mhm.
parts would take over. That's how the brain works. It's
Mhm.
an incredible tool, but you have to stimulate that, and you know, when you're talking about kids, and again, that's why I take my grandkids hiking, and we take them and overnights and all these kind of things, and because it does stimulate the brain, and they don't realize it. You don't come back, oh wow, I've got new neurons. You just come
yeah.
back and say, you know what, Nepal was awesome. I want to go again. You don't even
Yeah.
realize
Yeah.
what happened, but
Mhm.
that's what happens. And so again, it goes back to that being able to lead people into that zone of proximal development
Yeah.
to
You
where
know, you're
you're
right.
taking somebody.
You're so right because, this last, little expedition we did to replace a summit sign, of a mountain near here, I haven't, had a heavy pack in a long time, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I was carrying, of course I carry extra things to make the trip safe for the kids and stuff, and I was like, "Man, am I really gonna do this? Because 'Cause I'm taking that wooden sign up there, I let the kids take it up the last, 1,000 feet of the climb, but
yeah,
I'm there for 6 miles hauling that thing uphill, and, I even asked myself, like, "Did did I bite off more than I could chew
Mhm.
here?" You know what I mean? But I did have to make that decision in the middle, and later on, when we're all safe, we're all back home, I'm like, "Hey, that was great. I love that."
yeah.
But
Well,
Somehow
during it, I hated it.
you always forget all the misery, and
Yeah.
and this is a scientific fact too, isn't it? Even with childbirth and stuff, you forget the miserable things, the horrible things,
yeah.
and you're really left with the positive.
Well, you know what? That brings up a good point that I bring out all the time. And some of those 50-mile hikes I did in the Cascades, one trip was a 9-day, 50-mile hike in the Cascade Crest Trail. So it's high,
Okay.
5,000 feet, whatever the crest,
Nice.
Cascades. Well, it rained 7 out of 9 days.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was miserable. It was horrible,
Oh.
and it was like worst trip ever. But my thing was I was never going to quit,
Mhm.
barring any snow or bad condition. But I wasn't going to quit because I wanted the kids to feel like they accomplished something hard,
Mhm.
Yeah.
sense of accomplishment, confidence, and. But anyway, afterwards, if you ask kids, to list, one column the things they didn't like about the hike, and one column the things they liked. Right afterwards, the things they didn't like column will be about yay long. The things they
Ah,
liked will be about yay long.
yeah.
But if you ask them the same thing in 6 months,
Mhm.
the things they didn't like about the trip becomes yay long, and the things they like
There you
becomes yay
go.
long. That's called
Mhm.
nostalgia. And so
Boom.
that's how our
Oh.
brain works. And so I never get worried about the kids crying in the tent all night and wanting mommy and all that stuff, because it ain't going to happen with me, and I
Yeah.
ain't going to quit. And the thing is, I know that in 6 months they're all going to be excited about the next summer trips, which they are. I've been
Mhm.
doing for 20 years up in Alaska, the Seward Beach hike, 5 mile hike out on the beach and stuff.
Mhm.
And they take 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds now. And man, in February, and now we're going to go next week, and all the kids are excited about it. They're all
Yeah.
excited. But when they first do it, it's tough. They're walking, it's hard and long. But by come February or wintertime, they're all excited about the beach hike, and they'll do it. And I'll take Adigan and Brecken this year, so my grandkids. So and
Yeah.
he's done it 3 times or twice now. Adigan has. He loves it.
Wow.
And
That's really good.
Brecken, he'll do it his first time this time, but.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's just a fun time. So you just do that, and nostalgia works in our favor. So yeah, like most of the painful things we go through, we end up thinking somehow through the positive of it. I mean, I used to log for 10 years.
Yeah.
I used to hate every day working out in the woods. Rainy,
Oh,
cold,
man.
dangerous, logs everywhere, crazy stuff in
Mhm.
the Cascades. Logging. I loved it at the time, but it got to be a time when, oh man, this is miserable. But you know what? Now I look back and think of all the good times.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sitting out in the woods, just you know, not that you
Yep.
want to hear trees falling and just whatever. It's just I don't know. It's how it works, and
Mhm.
so I never get too worried. Well, like you carrying that sign next year, you can carry a bigger one.
I know, that's what I'm afraid of, that
Yeah,
I would challenge myself even more next year, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well,
and
that's how it works.
our youngest son, he's 3.5, and he really wants to go. He's like, "Why didn't Daddy take me on his hike?"
Yeah.
And that's something too. It's a great example for young ones. Like they come back and they've done this incredible
Oh
thing,
yeah.
and I want that too.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
training too.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what, you wanna give them a reward. Like I'd give. Sometimes when they get old enough, you can give them a Swiss Army knife or something.
Mm,
Mhm.
As a reward, and you can get their name engraved on it, and all that kind of stuff.
mhm.
Oh,
And
yeah, that's a good idea.
yeah, stuff like
Well,
that.
and you're
Swiss
good at
Army
that
knife,
too. You're
huh?
great with that too, and even like I know you take lots of pictures. Like take the cool picture at the summit, or take
Yeah.
the funny miserable pictures too.
Oh yeah,
Just to document that, and like the t-shirts that you had. I don't know if you still have them. The compass that you gave to
yeah,
Hansel, like those are really good too.
Yeah. It's in our living room, and I look at it every
Hmm.
time I
yeah.
take the boys out to hike, and I'm like, "Man, Mike really did something for me there," and
Well,
it
symbols are important because they represent the meaning behind it, and so
Hmm.
it's really important to give them a good symbol when they accomplish so much. You can make a ceremony based. I used to do a rite of passage with kids when they turned 18, 19, and dads would
Mm.
give them, have a ceremony, and dads would talk about their kids and then give them a symbol,
Hmm.
and we just did with Ian, with Jake
Oh,
and
Hmm.
Ian,
cool.
and had some guys up here did it, and I gave Ian can't, it was on a picture frame, and it was a kukri, which is a Nepali knife,
Oh, yeah, that's
Mm.
cool.
and I gave him that, and the Sloan motto I had engraved below it, which Jake has too, and Daniel. But it's the Sloan motto is "Aut invenium, aut faciam," which is Latin for I'll either find a way or invent one.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so those kind of things are important. So you want to kind of get into that with your kids when they get so old, and even when they get to be a junior higher and they can handle a knife without losing it, which
Yeah.
can, but or just whatever. But a Swiss Army knife is always kind of special and engrave the names on it, whatever. But
Hmm.
they become kind of a neat little gift. And
Yeah.
by the way, I used to, 20 years ago, I had this VCR recorder that had
Oh, the big
VCR
ones?
tapes in it, the old ones. And
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
used to film all these trips, and then I filmed the father, son, daughter canoe trip, the 8-day canoe trip up in Bower Lakes, and I'd film it and give everybody a copy at the end. But this one guy he kind of a big guy, and that it's paddling 6 hours. He'd get out and just fall in the beach and start snoring, and so I'd film him in those kind of awkward positions, and
Yeah.
make fun of him, but he'd be in the tent snoring, all that stuff. So he's kind of guy I film a lot. Well, after the trip, I'd give them all a copy, and you know what? That was 20 years ago, probably. Well, more than that, 25 years ago, and
Uh-huh.
I don't know, 5 years ago, I was down in Colville area where we were at. Met his wife, and I said, "Oh, how's Scott doing?" And she said, "Well, Scott died. He got
Oh,
cancer and
no.
died."
Oh.
He was my age, He's like, but
Mhm.
anyway, he got cancer and died. But she said, "You
Mm,
know what we did? We had the public funeral. Everybody came to it in Colville, and then she said, just the family went back and we watched that Bower Lakes video."
oh, wow.
Now, Scott was 40 at the time, and Brian, his kid, was 12. He's a friend of Jake's, and
Mhm.
they're all running around, whatever. And now Brian's 40, watching it, and watching his dad
Mhm.
Yeah.
on this video, and his Brian's got a kid now. His grandpa's, see his grandpa up there.
Mhm.
Anyway, they didn't go back and talk about the sermon from November 2nd. They didn't talk about any of that stuff. They talked
Yeah.
about the memories and the legacies,
Mhm.
and that's the thing that I guess the church can get so off on, is just always this focus on information and
Mhm.
sermons.
Mhm.
And well, let me tell you, having done educational stuff, it's the worst method in the world to
Mhm.
learn is lecture orientation.
Mm,
People
Mhm.
got about a 10-minute attention span, and they forget 80% of what they hear.
mhm.
There's
Yeah.
got to be a better way to develop people, and that's when started using the outdoors to do that.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'll argue that till I die because I've studied it. I know. And
Mhm.
Jesus didn't teach that. He was out in the fields, man.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
They
by
were
the way,
hiking
that's why I
everywhere.
wrote that book. I wrote that book. I wrote that book using physical illustrations to illustrate spiritual truth and parabolic
Mhm.
kind of teaching,
Yeah.
And that's a great thing for dads to have on that kind of, if they want devotionals or whatever. But and it's not a romance, Natalie, so you can't. Girls don't like it. No Christian romance there.
Right on.
It's an adventure book.
No, I really enjoy the quality of your writing. It's a really good read, and I haven't read, very much of it yet, but
Yeah. Well, I
really
hope
good.
you read a little bit of it. It's just more,
Yeah.
you'll appreciate the lesson from the wrong bathroom in there. That happened in Arkansas
Okay.
or Louisiana, actually.
Okay.
So
I remember the bathrooms in India,
no,
and
this is a different deal in the bathroom thing, but
okay.
you'll appreciate it.
You
So
know,
they're kind of
I
go ahead.
had I had a pastor kind of mentor friend of ours. He I explained, we were just sitting around talking, and I explained, I went to India, and I said, there's so many millions of people who use the
Mhm.
squatty potty. Like, it's not normal to me, but who am I to say it's gross or it's wrong? Like, it's just different. And he's like, "Thank you," because he makes lots of trips to India, and um, it's not normal for me, but it's normal for a lot of people, and it's that experience when you took me out to India, to Asia, that I learned that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it
You learn
it's
a
so
lot of things
true.
over there.
It's so true, like, being out of your comfort zone. I've heard so many stories about, pastors saying, "Get out of your comfort zone," but they don't have any activities getting them out of their comfort zone, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I believe you, Mike. That's why I wanted to make it a part of our church where young boys can come out, and we'll have something for the girls too. I have one more question. I know time's running aground here, but
Okay.
we run into parents a lot that are risk averse, so they're like questioning whether or not to have their kids come with us. And I explain to them everything's safe, but they're going to be challenged. They're physically, mentally, even emotionally. How do we communicate with parents that are too safe?
Well, that's the problem that the illustration I gave you about the guy going to India. His parents
Hmm.
were Christians. Everybody claims to have this faith, but faith is really accepting a certain risk, and then
Hmm.
you grow in that. And so I would say parents that, well, they're stunted. Let's put it that way,
Okay.
stunted in their own ability to assume risk, and so everything's fearful out there. Chaos out there is to be avoided. In other words, everything that I don't know, I can't control, is to avoid. And
Yeah.
I can't put my kid in that because I can't control it, so therefore he can't go.
Ah.
Well, that's about that's about the worst thing you can do to young kids, girls
Mm,
and boys, is to withhold their ability to develop risk, the
Mhm.
ability to accept risk, because that's really stunting them for life. Because, like I said, this isn't where their future lies.
yeah,
Potential's out here.
Mhm.
yeah,
Our job as parents and leaders is to get people into that chaos a little bit at a time,
mhm,
and to develop in them the ability to handle risk. And again, develop in them the ability in their mental, neurological sense to view risk not as panic, but as opportunity. And it just doesn't come overnight. It takes the development. It takes actually stretching brain, the stuff like that. I mean, that's what you're doing
yeah,
inadvertently. You're actually developing their neuro ability to develop new neurons and channels, and it's quite a remarkable. And
Mhm.
the brain
mhm,
is, and as I told you, Natalie, with Al and what happened,
Mhm.
the
yeah,
brain's amazing, but it's a
Mhm.
left out part of our development of people to understand what's really happening when you put people into risk, new chaos. You're actually developing them the ability to handle more because their brain is accepting that risk, and not red lights go on for fleeing, but a
Mhm.
challenge, and that's the kind of young guys we want, and
yeah,
girls. That's the kind of young people we want, is people that can take risks, because that translates right over into the kingdom.
Mhm.
yes,
Is your ability to, yeah, let's do a 8-day trip in the Cascades to, yeah, we can go to India or Nepal or whatever, and so
mhm,
it translate. You can't separate this stuff. Well, this is church and this isn't. It's
right,
who you are as a person. And so when you develop people and you're developing them the ability to handle risk and all that stuff, you're developing somebody in the world as well as the kingdom that can really do new things and stretch out for risk.
yeah. This
And
reminds
life
me
is going to
of
be full of risk. You can't
yeah,
you can't
Mhm.
shut people off from risk,
Mhm.
and you'll be
definitely,
sorry if you do. And
Mhm.
these parents that are doing that are not doing their kids any favor,
yeah,
because it's going to cut back in them the ability to assume life risks,
Mhm.
let
that's
alone
right,
kingdom risks. And so, yeah. So anyway, that's been my big thing, is get people developed mentally and neurologically, and I
mhm,
know develops them neurologically that, yeah, okay, they can do this and this because they did this and this. And you don't want to be a parent that you know stops them from this.
yeah,
Keeps little Johnny here. I
yeah,
safe little Johnny at church
At
every Sunday.
McDonald's.
McDonald's, no way, man.
Well,
We
and it's
want,
like we have to trust our kids to the Lord, they're
yeah.
not ours, they're the Lord's, and we have to be good stewards.
No, and you don't want to. It's not like I lead people into dangers, like outdoors. You
Right, right.
can't control, and there's things that
right,
can
Mhm.
happen. But nevertheless, I'm willing to assume that risk
Mhm.
and try to get people through. And so far, it's
Mhm.
always worked. Never lost anybody. Had some
Mhm.
problems in Nepal a little bit, but
mhm,
you know, because as you know, I did the Great Himalaya Trail. It goes from the east of Nepal to the west, 1,000 miles through the
mhm,
Himalayas.
Whew.
It's like the Crest Trail,
Mhm.
but it's through the Himalayas, and I can do that because I know the language. I lived there 4 years, whatever. It's not a proper trail; it's village trails connections. But I had a guy on that one time, and you're back there in the Himalayas 4 or 5 days or 6 days. You're remote. There's no 911, no little guy with a badge, U.S. Forest Service. It's going to
yeah,
protect you and get you out. You're back in the Himalayas where they don't even have matches yet, and and so this one guy jumped over a creek and five
oh
days
no,
back there, and he tore his meniscus,
oh
Uh,
no,
and so his kneecaps up by his Adam's apple. And I said, "Man, you got problems, man." And
yeah,
I said, "Well, here's your four choices." I tell
yeah,
people this. Here's your four choices. You can stay here till it gets better, which won't happen.
uh-huh,
You can pay $10,000 for a Nepali Army helicopter, and that's not group funds, that's your funds.
yep,
I can shoot you, I can kill you right now, and we'll say good service for you.
put
Or
you
you
out of
can
your
hobble
misery.
out. You can hobble
Yeah.
out with a stick. What's your choice? Well, they always chose the fourth one, and they hobble out.
Yeah.
Well, he hobbled out. He got a surgery. Went back the next year with me, so it all ends well. But
Mhm.
those kind of things happen. I can't
Yeah.
control that.
Mhm.
But you know what? That guy's faith. He was so he just loved it, and went through all that, and he was a glutton for punishment, and went back to another guy. You'd have to do that trip in sections because you can't do it in one lump sum.
Yeah. For sure.
But nevertheless, it's I can't control it back there. I've had guys get back there and have almost mental breakdowns. Well, I can't help it if you're mentally fragile, but you will
Mhm.
get through this, and
Yeah.
they get through it, and then all of a sudden they're stronger because of it.
Amen. Yeah.
So that's always a chaos, the things I can't control,
Mhm.
and but we all just get into it together, you might say, and come out.
Definitely. This reminds me of it's like the marquee scripture for our church here in Southern California. It's Matthew 16:18, where Jesus said, "Upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." It seems like the church has lost its way in terms of we're not going into the risky part and conquering it. We're staying away from it. We're acting like we need to be allergic to risk, as we were talking about, and it produces weak Christians, and it doesn't change the culture, which is the goal of the church, is to change the culture towards Christ, not the other way around.
Yeah,
And so I love what you're doing, Mike, and we resonate with you a lot, and we want to build a church here where it's risky to join, not for the sake of risk, but for the sake of the gospel. And so I love all these stories. We want to have you back. This has just been amazing. I haven't been to Alaska in a while now,
yeah.
um, but I got to fix my
Mhm.
passport, because I need that stupid new ID to even fly domestically. You know what I mean? But
I thought you were gonna say your shoulder.
yeah, I need
Gotta fix
surgery. I
that
do.
too.
I need to fix that too, but
Oh, I
it
can
still
fix that.
works.
I took
Yeah.
I took Boy Scouts first aid. I can fix your shoulder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would love to take my kids up to, a Seward
Mhm.
hike, and
Oh
I know
yeah,
they're gonna love it. But Mike, man, thank you for all the gems in this past hour that you've given us, and I'm sure we'll talk again. So, is there any last advice you would give to parents that want their children to take more risk and to be able to cope and conquer chaos?
well, the biggest thing I can say is risk doesn't always have to be life threatening. It can just
Mhm.
be something new. When we talk about risk, it's like sending my kids on a backpacking trip or something. It's new, but they're not going to die. Very few are going to die out there. I don't know of any really, unless, and of course, you send them with a leader that they don't have to worry about getting lost, and the leader sets rules and has good things.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
the way you develop people that can manage risk is you do it small steps at a time.
Yeah.
And you don't, and so small steps into this and then that and then that. And pretty soon your kid has developed in them the ability to not to manage risk, and say, yeah, I can do that. Or I don't know what that's like, but I'm going to do it because, again, the thing is, you don't want to stop because this is where somebody unlocks the future potential of somebody. I don't care
Mhm.
what it's in Christianity, computer science, I don't care what it is. It's going to be exploring these new areas that haven't been discovered yet in yourself.
Yeah.
But when it comes to development personally, the ability to handle this is where it unlocks their ability to become a world changer or a
Yes.
community changer
That's
or
right.
a family changer or
Mhm.
somebody that can, really set a new course in life, that can really change people and or change those around them or just the plain ability to take your family someday when you get married, not you, but the person gets married and they have
Mhm.
kids and they can start to take them in the outdoors and use the outdoors to develop those kids, because that's what you're doing. How are you going to develop somebody? And when you take somebody in the outdoors, you're using the outdoors as a method to develop them
Mhm.
because nobody controls the outdoors. It might
That's right.
rain, it might snow, it might whatever, but you
Yeah.
can still use that to develop them versus sitting in a classroom and you got the thermometer perfect and everything lights are perfect. That doesn't develop anybody.
Mhm.
Sorry. Now there's maybe a time and a place for that, But
Yeah.
you don't want that to be the sole development of somebody's ability to manifest faith. And so, when you use the outdoors to develop somebody, it's developing them to the way to view the world,
Mhm.
and how to view their life and actions and all that kind of stuff. So parents, you don't want to be the one to withhold that from your kid.
Yes,
You
amen.
just don't. And yeah, it's tough to let go, but hey, trust the leaders and let them do it, and guarantee kids
Yeah.
will change. The kids will change for the better. That's like
Amen.
taking a
Yeah.
toddler and said, you can't go do anything. Just sit in the corner until you're 18. Well, what kind of 18-year-old are you going to get?
Pretty
Yeah.
sad.
You're going to get a
Sad.
weird 18-year-old that's afraid to even touch a dial because he was told no all the time.
Yeah.
You can't do that with kids, period. I don't care what age. 12-year-old, listen, you got a window of opportunity, 12 to 16.
There you go.
Don't blow that window, because
Yeah.
when they get to be 16, they get girlfriend, boyfriends, and jobs.
Mhm.
12, entering into this, hey, I want to, what's out there? I want to do that. Yeah, let's hike. And they have the enthusiasm to do that. Don't squelch that. Because when they turn 16, you pluck them out there into this world, and the only thing they can do is play on their stupid cell phone or go to Six Flags, in their youth group.
Yeah. Well, I
Uh,
love how direct you are, Mike. Yeah. It's a
well,
very powerful message, and
all right, buddy. Good talking with you, and yeah, I've got to get you up to Alaska sometime in the summer, and
yeah, it's
lots
gonna
of
be
cabin.
amazing.
Awesome.
It's gonna be so good. So you guys watching, just remember, Mike, do you have a website or anything that you wanna?
No, I don't. No.
Yeah. Well,
Just
let's
hold up the book one more
okay.
Yeah,
time.
the book would be a good one.
Buy this
It's
on
on Amazon,
Amazon.
right?
Yeah, Amazon. Yeah,
Yeah, Bear Attacks, Dog Teams,
it's a
and a
great
Sinking
devotional.
Boat by
Short
Mike
little
Sloan.
lessons and using parabolic teaching to illustrate spiritual truth.
Mhm. So you'll
But
enjoy it. The kids will enjoy it. And again, for you guys watching, I hope you enjoyed Mike, and we'll have him back on. Just remember to like and subscribe onto this channel, and make sure you share it with your friends. And then YouTube's gonna recommend a video over here to watch next. So thank you guys for joining us, and we just want to say we love you all. Come and join us outside sometimes. Godspeed and God bless. Bye.
Bye.